Morning, ladies. If you are watching, I'm just looking at the computer and the video or the camera to make sure everything works and everything's going. So it seems like it is. I apologize first and foremost if you joined us on Monday and there was no video. Unfortunately, I had to go to the UIF offices and they took a little bit longer than I anticipated. So to that, Cujo. Just with regard to Friday's block, here we have it over here. If anybody can see what the mistake is, drop me a line. When I finished it up and I put it up on the display on the design board and I took a step back and I thought, oh, goodness gracious me. But you know what? As we always say, every quilt can't be perfect. So this will be our little imperfect scenario. So today, without any further ado, we are going to be looking at the flashing windmills. So that's basically the block over there. You can see it's a nice block to work with. It's quite easy. So we have basically your block number one, your die number one, which is a... Oh, goodness, you see now, I haven't got it here. I do have it here, but I've taken the wrong. There we go. So die number one is the big square, which is the 6.5 inch finished square. And I thought it was die number 6, which is the square on point. So just putting that away. And then we have got die number 5, which is the half square triangles, 3 inch finished half square triangles. So basically we're working with die number 1 and die number 5. So there we go. Again, I did forget to go and get a new cutting mat out of the shop. But I have got the old cutting mat just to show you what happens when your cutting mat needs to be replaced. They start to literally fall apart. And if you use a cutting mat that looks like this, you will find that your fabric will catch in these little slits and it will move your fabric. So you won't get perfect cuts. Not only that, it's not going to cut your fabric properly because it's the mat that does all the hard work and not the die. So that's basically what you would be looking at if you had a mat that was no longer viable or no longer useful. So we're working with 3 colors today. We've got a really nice orange, citrusy, what would you call it, a mandarin kind of color. And then we've got 2 purples that are going to go nicely together in the pinwheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the 2 big squares first. Let's see if we can get this nicely spaced on our fabric so that we don't waste too much fabric. And I see that it is going to work. I'm going to fold my fabric over because I don't have to worry too much about the correct pattern or the correct how we're going to lay it out. I'm just checking to make sure it's straight, both pieces are covered, and we're off to a flying start. Always remember with your mats that you need to alternate them. Not only that, what you also need to do is move the mat around. So try and cut on different areas of the mat. Otherwise, you'll find that you're going to put specific pressure, like on this mat, and that piece is going to wear out before anything else. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to see, I want to use a different part of my mat. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have our first 2 squares up. I can see it did cut a little bit into, on the second piece of fabric at the bottom of the 1 square is a little bit off. So I must just remember that when I actually do my cutting. my pinning or my piecing. Okay, so now with this, we are looking at, I just want to check my, so we need basically, we need 4 and 4, so we need 8. What we're going to do is we will concertina. There's 2, 4, 6, and 8. But what I am going to do before I actually do what I've just suggested is just check that the fabric is going to cover, all 4 pieces are going to cover. Otherwise, what happens is we have a situation whereby you cut and not all 4 of the triangles are covered. So what I've done now is I've folded the fabric in half and then in half again. Your dies can take up to 6 layers of fabric at a time, which is not being that doesn't have applique paper attached. If there is applique paper attached, that is going to reduce the number of pieces of fabric. So with applique paper, you're probably looking at about 4 pieces that you can attach, and that will then give you a nice clean cut. You can see now with using this cutting mat, it's cutting really, really nicely. I have on the one triangle cut a little bit into the selvage, but I'm not going to worry too much about that, simply because that will will fall into the selvage. All right, here we go again. So we're going to do a half, just like that. And we are then going to fold this piece of let me just check here that this is actually going to be okay. Again, as I've said to you, rather check twice. Yeah, that's going to work fine. Rather check twice than cut a piece of fabric and then you're sitting with something that has a corner missing or a side missing, and you're going to have to recut that piece into a smaller shape so that you don't waste it. Okay, let me fold over like that, and there we have it. Okay, so we're going to cut our 8 pieces in one swipe because we've got a double triangle here. And again, I'm just looking to try and cut on this cutting mat where we won't use the mat over and over and over again. As I've said to you before, just be careful with fabric. You don't want to crease the fabric under the die, because invariably what happens then is it creases it so badly you can't get the crease out. Here we've had it, you see. I didn't check to make sure that my triangles were correct, and what has in effect happened now is we have 2 units that are still joined in the middle. So what I'm doing is I'm just checking to see if I can at least cut one set of triangles, and then we're going to have to cut another one. In fact, I'm not going to waste time this morning. I see my rotary cutter is not here. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's cut again, as I say, simply rather than wonder how that happened. as you can see, even after checking and checking and checking and checking, you can still have little issues that come along. So I will use those other two or 4 triangles. Here they are over here. As you can see, they haven't. Have a look at them later and see if we can at least salvage 2 of the triangles, and then we can use them in another project, and we'll then put the other pieces into the scrap bin. Okay, so let's start off. We're going to do some chain piecing. So we've cut up our block out. It's been 10 minutes. I think there might be these pinwheels. So I'm trying to ensure that my triangles fit perfectly together so that we get perfect squares. But I do believe that we will more than likely need to use our height compensating tool to be able to get those the centers looking really nice. Spring is definitely here in Johannesburg. I haven't had to put the heater on today in the studio. It's been really, really nice. Hopefully the Western Cape is following suit. Just lining these up nicely so that we can, as I say, get a nice finished square. We want the triangle to make a perfect square. All right, all pieces have been pinned. Let's start off. I'm using my Eleanor Burns Quilt in a Day Sew Straight template, which just helps to keep your work aligned and just straight. It's really quite a nice little tool, I must say. I'm going to set my machine with my needle in the needle down position, just so that when I stop stitching, there is some kind of secure anchor in my work. I've got to remember to keep my distance, simply because I don't have glasses with me today. You also don't want to stretch your squares. You want to try and stitch them with as even a stitch as possible. Okay. Okay, so there we have our 8 units. Okay, cut off your excess thread that you've started with, and let's give them a quick press. Get rid of the cutting mats. Okay, always press with the darker color, with the pressing towards the darker color. Remember not to iron, but to press, so that you have nice squares. You don't want off-shaped squares because that's going to affect the overall look of your design. A nice way that I find to iron, to be able to fold those or to get that crisp finish, is to lay the piece out with the light side on the bottom, darker side on top, darker piece on top, and just fold it over and press. So we're going to be looking at doing a mystery quilt from January of 2021. I'm busy looking at designing that. You'll follow us on YouTube, and every week you will get another block for your quilt. We will be using the companion set. So depending on obviously what you would prefer, you can have the 10-inch, the 12-inch, the 9-inch, the 8-inch, supplying you with the manual or the rotary cutting instructions as well. So if you don't have an Accuquilt and you would still like to follow us on that, on the mission, you can see 22 minutes. I better up my game. Ooh. Okay, so we should have 4 units to sew, which we've got. Just be careful when you are sewing near pins that you don't drive over the pin with your machine. That can cause some real issues. Not only will you have to replace your needle, but the pin might get damaged and your machine's timing might actually be thrown out. So it's really imperative that if you do hit a pin, that you do it at a very slow pace so that you don't damage your machine. So when stitching these squares, just ensure, oh goodness me, apologies about that. Let's actually put it on vibrate. I think it actually may be the vet just to tell me what is the time. Yeah, 10:30. That my babies are out of theatre. The little kittens that we adopted during the lockdown went today to be spayed. Poor little ninnies. Never in my life felt so terrible not letting them eat this morning, and you know, and they look at you with these, Mom, how can you do this to us? We're so starving, hungry. Anyway, rather that than have extra. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to again press our seam towards the darker side or the darker piece of fabric. And the reason why we do this is to hide the seam when you quilt the fabric, or when you have a big quilt finished, that actually hides the seam underneath the darker piece of fabric. So that's why it's done that way. Okay, again, we're going to press towards our dark. When pressing, just remember to fold to ensure that you don't get a bump underneath your fabric. So ensure that the pieces of fabric fold over nicely. Okay, so that's that done. Now again, we're going to just lay up our pieces to see that we are in the correct space. There's the one and the other one. Okay, so the best way to pin these pinwheels is to butt your seams up into the middle. I would measure, in fact, I'm going to measure a quarter of a seam. I've got to add a quarter, which I found here in the studio on Monday afternoon. So I'm actually going to use this just to measure and to make sure that we hit the seam line at the right spot so that everything is the same. And we get a nice finish to our pinwheel. Otherwise, what happens is you end up getting a bit of the center is not clearly defined. I don't know if I'm going to manage to get it with this. Let's hope. Okay, let's do that. And then I'll do this. What I'm going to do is try my damnedest to make sure that the stitches hit the right place. It's always such a battle when you've got so many pieces of fabric bunched up in the center of this pinwheel. All right, let's see how this goes. I've got my height adjuster. This will actually be the first time I use this tool while making pinwheels. So let's really hope that we get a better result than normal. We just clipped the pin. Okay, let's have a squiz and see. We're a bit high on the bottom piece. It's a pity, but it's come out not too badly. Let's see if we can get a better result from this one. This one might have actually turned out a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So now what we are just going to do is obviously press. Looking at the final result now with the ironing. It actually hasn't turned out to be too bad. Remember when you press to make sure your pieces fold over neatly and not scrunched up, because that will then determine whether you will have a big bulky piece underneath your center. So there we have, you can see this one over here is not as good, but this one's turned out pretty nicely. And that is achievable using that height adjustment tool. You can buy it at any Bernina store. They retail for 75 Rand. That's basically what it is over there. And that is such a fantastic tool. I use that on my cover stitch machine for years and years and years. Whenever I sewed over, and if any of you use a cover stitch machine, you may have experienced the same problem. Sew over the seam and immediately your machine starts skipping stitches. With this little height adjustment tool, that doesn't happen anymore. It is fantastic. Really, really is. It's a wonderful piece of equipment to have in your sewing kit. All right, let's just make sure that we are doing things the right way. Otherwise, we're really going to have a bit of a problem when it comes time to piece these larger pieces together. See, we're sitting on 35 minutes. Let's hope we can beat the 40-minute challenge with this particular block. It's not a difficult block to stitch. It's fairly simple, and I must be very honest with you, it's quite striking. It can really be used in a number of ways. And I have forgotten to actually look and see what the history of the block is. In that file, I can quilt, or we can quilt, or whatever it was called. I've just realized that there is a area that we could have. Actually, no, we don't need to. I was going to mark it, but we actually don't need to. There we go. First one up. Nice, easy block for you to be able to possibly start a quilt with. This is also a block that if you had some really striking color combinations, you could play really, really nicely. We have got a fairly nice, I like the color combination. I think that it works quite nicely together, but then some of you may have realized that I am a little bit out there, just a little. Okay, that and that, we are ready to rock. Oh, let's press first, and we're going to press towards the orange on both pieces, just because that's going to give us the least amount of bulk. There we go. Sort it out. Start piecing in the middle. Your seams, you will see, will butt nicely together because they have been ironed the correct way. Here we may have a little bit more of a easing in, and you will have to ensure that you don't drive over your seam, so make sure it's just lying the right way. You can possibly pin it if it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, but at least then you know it's going where it needs to go. or it's holding, you know, you're not getting that seam folding over on itself and causing bulk that you don't necessarily want. Alrighty, there we go. So we pinned, we're ready to rock and roll, and we are sitting on 38 minutes, give or take, because we did chat for 2 minutes, so we will definitely make this challenge. Thank goodness, I was beginning to think it would never happen again. Just keep in mind you don't really want to drive over your pins, so let's pull them out. And there we have it. Flying windmills, done and dusted in 38 minutes. So we cut and pieced the flying windmills block in 38 minutes. Thank you for joining us here in the 40-minute challenge. Please come out and follow us again on Friday, where we'll be looking at another block to see if we can beat or if we can cut and piece the block in 40 minutes. Thank you so much. Have a good day.